Finally, I'm so excited to welcome and introduce our speaker this month. Karl Maier is a business advisor who provides business growth strategies, fractional CFO and COO services, and financial support for businesses that are preparing for sale or acquisition. He's a certified turnaround analyst, business valuation analyst, and a retired CPA. And he is also the best-selling author of the book Surfing Economic Chaos, which explains how long-term economic trends currently present major opportunities for American businesses, which I know applies and is super relevant for all of you as you're thinking about the economic situation that we're in and how to navigate that and plan as best you can in your integrator seat for your organization. So I'm super excited to turn the mic over to Karl. I'm going to stop sharing my slides so you can kick yours off. But thank you so much for being here, Karl. And you might be mute, Karl. I think you're talking.
Yes, that mute thing. Absolutely. Yep. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Jessica. And we have slides.
Way to go. We're doing it.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I know we've got a lot of integrators. You're running your business, lower middle market companies. And not long ago, I was talking to the owner of a business, a machine shop here in the Houston area, Sandy Baker. Sandy, he was telling me about what he was looking at in the economy and how confused he was. Interest rates are going up, they're going down, inflation, what's that going to do? What's the labor market? One day my banker's ready to make me a loan and they're not, now they are. And so how can I make sense of what's going on in the economy at this point? And not necessarily, this week, but let's take a perspective and say, what does this year or the next few years look like, and kind of put a framework around it so I can, yes, make sense of what's going on. And we're going to kind of step back. We're going to step way back and think about what the world looked like when it was just an agricultural economy. And, this could be 50, 100, or a couple hundred years ago, depending on the economy. But the population was lots of young people. And unfortunately, people died younger, and you had very few people over 65. In fact, the majority of people were under 25. And that's just what the whole world looked like before the Industrial Revolution. But the Industrial Revolution did happen different times in different countries, and that pulled people away from the farm and urbanized them. So now we're all in these big cities. I'm in Houston. The U.S. has got cities all over the place. China's industrialized, even Africa is urbanizing. Japan was one of the first countries after World War II to really urbanize intensely. And what's happened is by today, their population has kind of turned upside down. Now, instead of mostly under 25-year-olds, they have the biggest cohort of over 65-year-olds. And that has massive impacts for the economy, which we'll dig into in just a moment here. So Japan is the furthest along of any industrialized economy at this point. Germany's not far behind. There's a number of other countries in Europe, in Asia, that are facing these same things. What's North America look like? Well, the US is aging faster than Mexico, but not quite as fast as Canada. But North America as a whole is still has a much younger demographic profile than some of these other countries around the world. And that has some really profound implications, because pretty predictably, we do things at certain ages. When we're in our, under 20 years old, we're predominantly in school. We're not contributing to the economy in that sense. When we're from 25 to 45, we're buying houses, we're having kids, we're spending a lot of money, and we're generally not saving a lot of money. When we get to 45 to 65, that's the age group when generally kids have gone off and left the nest, and we're saving, we're at our highest earning potential, and we're saving a lot of money. That helps, that savings produces investment funds for the economy. So that's fantastic. And then at 65 plus, we start to draw down on that retirement. And so what's happening at those different age groups is obviously predictable. And if you change the weighting of which age groups have the most people, that changes how the economy behaves. And so we can use that to give a perspective on what's happening in the US. And one of the things we're seeing is we've got this pretty significant group of, it was the largest cohort in US history of baby boomers that are retiring. And they're on average retired now. In 5 years, the youngest boomer will be 65, and they're being replaced by the Gen Z, the Zoomers, which is a much smaller age group. They're the children of Gen X. And so it's very significantly smaller group than the baby boomers that are retiring. And because we know how many 20-year-olds we have today, we'll know how many 30-year-olds we have in 10 years. We know how many people were born last year, so we know how many 20-year-olds we're going to have in 20 years. So we can predict what the labor force looks like in the United States pretty accurately out for at least a decade, really about 20 years. And what we can see from this graph is that starting in the 60s, as two things happened, the boomers came into the workforce, and women started coming into the workforce, that it really changed the supply of labor. Supply of labor in the United States increased very significantly up till the mid 80s, and that was relatively constant all the way until 2020. And that's when we started to see a dip in the labor supply. Well, economics tells us when supply goes up, that the price goes down. So what we saw was the relative price of labor in the United States went down from the late 60s to the mid 80s. And for most of the past 40 years, we've seen that capital has gotten more returns than labor has. And what we're seeing is a reversal of that trend. And a couple of years ago, we started to notice it. We see wages increasing, labor unions are more powerful. Last year, the US labor force lost over 400,000 people just because of retirement and a smaller group coming in to replace them. We're going to see at least that many people leave the workforce net over the next 8 years. In fact, it's going to grow to over 1 million in the early 2030s per year. The workforce will reduce. That means supply is decreasing. The price of labor, relatively speaking, is going to increase. So expect labor prices to increase. We've also seen reshoring. We've seen a lot of let's bring things back to the United States. Manufacturing's come back to the United States. That's going to mean continued supply chain disruptions. Expect that to continue for a number of years. Both of these things together, the labor force and the reshoring, is going to push core inflation. Now, energy and food will fluctuate. Some years will be high, some years will be low, but your core inflation is going to be higher over the next 5 or 10 years than we've typically seen it over the past 20, 25 years. It doesn't mean we're seeing hyperinflation. That's not what I'm saying, but you will have a base level inflation that's higher than we've seen over the last 25 years. So this is just a more challenging business environment to navigate. The first 20 years of the century were some of the smoothest, easiest to manage business environments in history. Low interest rates, access to capital, stable labor markets, very complex supply chain that produced materials at a very low cost. and all that's changing. We will see labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and core inflation. Doesn't mean the US market's going to crash. In fact, a lot of opportunities come from this. Change is opportunity for entrepreneurs. If you're able to pivot, make changes, you'll see a lot of possibilities. And I'm having a lot of exciting times working with companies to identify and take advantage of these opportunities. So I'm sure you'll see a number of these in your business as well. And let's see, so Sandy, in fact, his machine shop has pivoted some of the markets he's focused on. He's here in Houston, so some of the LNG facilities are really good places. There's a lot of capacity being built there. So he's pivoted, he's found some new opportunities, and he's more focused on getting workers and taking care of those workers. So it's been very positive for him, and he's now got a much better perspective on what's going on in the world. So let's get back here. And if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, love to hear from you. And if you've got any questions, please reach out.